Hello, welcome to my world history notes, where I read to you and talk to you about conclusions or things I've learned about world history and conclusions I've drawn. Conclusions you might not agree with. I'm a Bible believer, so you're going to be totally different from me, possibly, most likely. Um, but the thing is I'm hoping that this what I say will draw you into studying it, so that you yourself will come up to your own conclusions and be interested in world history. So we'll begin today. We're going to go into a little background on the Cold War again before I get back into the actual events before the Yalta conference. But today, I want to go over a little background of events in the Cold War. First, let's keep in mind that spying, espionage, well planted Soviet agents then or communist agents now are simply one side to the danger from communist actors. The most dangerous thing is the influence they are able to have on politicians and bureaucrats who they have bought, blackmailed, or simply drawn to their side, even if the person doesn't fully buy into their propaganda or even wish his or her own country to fall. The greatest long term danger to a free government is the making of policy that sympathizes with the agenda of the global communist. Policy influence can be more important and devastating than espionage in the long haul. Here's what former communist Whittaker Chambers noted in his book entitled Witness, as quoted by M. Stanton Evans and Stalin's Secret Agents. I bought both of them to confirm the quote from the original source, which I often do that. In a situation with few parallels in history, this is from Whittaker Chambers, I'm quoting, that the agents of an enemy power were in a position to do much more than purloin documents. They were in a position to influence the nation's foreign policy in the interest of the nation's chief enemy, and not only on exceptional occasions like Yalta, where Alger Hiss's role, while presumably important, is still ill defined, or through the Morgenthau Plan for the destruction of Germany, which is generally credited to Soviet agent Harry Dexter White, who also helped lead us into Pearl Harbor. But in what must have been, back to Whittaker Chambers, but what must have been staggering sum of day-to-day decisions. So he really emphasizes it's the day-to-day policy that is more important than just the spying. Uh, and Whittaker Chambers, that's from his book Witness, and then quoted in Stem Stanton Evans's book Stalin's Secret Agents. Now, and again, another quote from Chambers' book: the power to influence policy has always been the ultimate purpose of the Communist Party's infiltration. It was much more dangerous, and as events have proved, much more difficult to detect than espionage, which, beside, it is trivial, though the two go hand in hand. Okay, so another interesting comment about the way World War II would play out can be found in a study of the German side of Normandy, D-Day, before the events we're discussing. In a two-volume work entitled D-Day Through German Eyes, a German journalist, Dieter Eckertz, supposedly interviewed many German veterans of D-Day, and his grandson, Holger, published these interviews. Now, these may be pseudonyms. These may not be real names. The interviews suggested that there were thousands of Russians fighting either by choice or by force for the Germans at Normandy, and their fate when captured, although hearsay for certain, seemed to suggest something other than what we would like to think of as good as we tried to placate our Russian allies to keep up the fight against the Nazis. Gustav Winter was one of the people supposedly interviewed in this book, and he had been a private stationed in Normandy, he said, on the German side. He was taken prisoner, and later he asked an English doctor what happened to the Russian troops in German uniform that he fought alongside of but did not see in Allied prison camps. And I must warn you that this two-volume work is very controversial, as some history writers insist it is a total fabrication, while others note that the amount of detail undermines that theory. I also would say that leftists would have a very good reason to try to discredit the accounts. So um, I'm going to quote this from this book now. I shall tell you something strange and worrying, Herr Eckertz, although you may not believe what I say. The Englishman told me after we had been drinking that he knew what happened. He said that when the Allies invaded Normandy, there were representatives from the Soviet Union among them. Yes, it's true. Among the American and English troops, there were commissars from the Red Army who were there specifically to search for the Russian defector troops. And when these Russian defectors were taken prisoner, they were immediately separated off and handed over to the Russian commissars right there on the beaches. They were put on ships from Normandy and sent back to Russia via the Baltic back to the Soviet Union. And when they got back, they were immediately shot as traitors. There was no Geneva Convention for them. The Americans and English didn't want them executed in France because it would have been hard to explain after the war. So they handed them over to their deaths, unquote. That's from the D-Day through German Eyes by Holger Eckertz. Now, even if you don't accept this compilation of interviews as credible, we have from other sources information about what was called the Russian Liberation Army under the command of Andrei Vlasov, who were Russians who fought for the German army during World War II. Those Russians that surrendered at Normandy, as well as others who fought for Germany during the entire war, were known to have been turned over to the Russians. They were shot, imprisoned in gulags, and Vlasov was hung after the war. Now, we're going to discuss another disturbing event called Operation Keel Haul later. Let's remember that Soviet influence and the influence of the Communist Party in America went all the way to the top even before the war. Democratic Congressman, by the way, Martin Dies, who served as the first chairman of the special committee to investigate un-American activities, reported this quote from FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, to him in 1940. He said, "Several of the best friends I have are communists." He was opposing Dies trying to root communists out of the government. So that was from Martin Dies' story on page 144. So now it was reported in Diana West's book American Betrayal, but I have to look and see where you got the book from, where you got the quote from. Get that book. Fortunately for Kindle, it's not hard. I don't have to wait for something in the mail. And because that's what I've learned is that you have to be careful about quotes. They can be misused and made to misrepresent what the writer intended. So I go back and look at the books that I got the quote from, see who's saying what. So next, I'm going to go back to the events of early 1945, leading up to the important Yalta Conference, where an ailing FDR, Winston Churchill, and Joseph Stalin met in the Crimean Peninsula to shape the post-war peace. And I hope that you'll dig into some of these topics and come to your own conclusions. And I thank you for listening to me, watching. All right, you have a great day, and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.